it's warm like this to conserve on energy. I keep the drapes and everything closed, and it's not that warm, but I keep it cool and it stays nice and dark inside.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi,
It's
Jim.
nice to have this sunny weather back. Just starting to feel like fall was here already, you know?
Oh, I like the rain though. It's keeping the
It's
fire
true.
down.
Yeah, well, that's true. And the garden loves it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My
It's
water bill loves
amazing.
it too.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. But I like the warmth for today anyway. Feels good.
Hey, oh, never mind. Got it. I only saw a few of you. I didn't see all of you, so
Oh.
figured
Hi,
it out.
both Nancy's.
Sure, Mitzi is coming.
Oh, there she is. I'll go ahead and promote her to panelist.
Oh, look at this, full house.
Good. Promote Mona.
Hi, Todd.
So we know that Lisa is coming tonight, right? I see that she's on the agenda.
No, she's not coming. She's,
Oh.
I got an email. She's buying a condo. I think she's closing or something. She couldn't make it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So Lorene is, we think, coming by phone. Did you bring her in or no? Is that?
I haven't seen her come in yet, but we'll give her another couple. Oh, we got a
Just
caller right
casual.
here.
We'll just do what we, you know.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and I see a caller just came in with the last digits 2522, and I'm gonna allow you to talk and see who we got here. Hi there. Can you let us know?
Hi,
Is this Lorraine?
it's Lorraine McClintock.
Oh, hi, great. I'm gonna go ahead and rename you so we can all see.
Thank you.
Where's May?
I thought I saw her.
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah.
There.
She's
Yeah, there
muted.
she is. There she is. I see her.
Hi, May.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, well, it looks like everyone's up and running with their audio and their video. Just a reminder, I'm Amber. Usually I'm more behind the scenes, but we don't have Allison tonight, so I'm just subbing in to help out with the tech check. So feel free to just speak up or shoot me a comment if you have any issues with anything technical wise. But otherwise, I think we're probably good to go. So I think I'll hand it off to Lorene. Is that right?
Yeah, if she's up for it on the phone.
See, I don't even know what I'm doing without an agenda here.
Well,
would it be helpful if I pulled the agenda up on the screen?
Okay, but I'm on my cell phone. I can only hear
let's
you. I can't see anything.
How about I'll step in and help you out, Lorene?
I would appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry.
So just so you know, Amber, we're recording this, correct?
Yep, that is right.
And it's a casual meeting. I hope you all still have your slippers on. So we're not going to take notes. We will record it so that you can go back and watch it, or people who couldn't come can go watch it, because I think it's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about tonight. And it sounds like some of you need to leave early, so just feel free to zoom out, just like Remember the Jetsons, where they used to just disappear. Maybe not. Anyway, one of the questions a lot of people talked about, asked about, was about Gladstone character and the building character specifically. So, you know, Jim's been thinking a lot about this, and I think, you know, Mona and Jennifer have been talking about it. And is Ray coming?
I'm not sure.
I think he's
I think
supposed
he
to.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
so-
think he is.
Anyway, he'll
He
probably
may
pop
join
in.
us in a few minutes.
Yeah, he'll pop in. So
Okay,
we're just going to show, just hand it over to Jim and
all right.
try to, you guys jump in really casual here, as casual as it can get on Zoom. So thank you all for coming.
Okay, well, we're excited about this opportunity to just have an open discussion about, you know, what feels right in terms of Gladstone character, architectural style. And, you know, typically this type of discussion is something that we always love engaging in. Oftentimes it's really during the next phase of design, schematic design, not this early in the process where we're really looking more at the overall organization of program and massing and so forth. But we jumped ahead and started looking at, well, where would you put windows? What are solid walls? You know, is there screening for the sun and so forth? So the drawings that we've shared are kind of embedded with, you know, architectural character, whether that's our intent or not. And so there's been quite a number of questions have come up, like, well, what is the right architectural character? And what we're seeing right now doesn't feel like Gladstone. And that's actually helpful feedback in its own right, honestly, for us to understand just what the, you know, when it's implicit that you see these kind of beige walls or gray walls, you see it, you take it as you should, as being the design intent, which is really not our desire. But anyway, it opens up now the idea of like, well, let's step back. Let's have a discussion about, well, what does feel right about Gladstone? What does make Gladstone unique? Start at the very beginning. You've been very helpful with sharing some examples as well of buildings in your community that you are proud of and you feel kind of capture the feeling that you know, you feel may embody perhaps a Gladstone style, or at least something you're comfortable with and proud of. So we wanted to have that type of discussion and also share a few other thoughts about, you know, sustainability or gardens and other qualities that might be embedded in this project. So I took the liberty of putting together some images, you know, and the idea is to kind of share this more as an armature or a framework for discussion. So it's not so much about talking to you, but drawing out from you what your preferences are. So does that sound okay to kind of use this, some images I pulled together as kind of a framework for talking about the character? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun for us and for me personally to kind of dig in and, you know, in a way we kind of probably did more when we were preparing for an interview, but now to kind of reflect on the input you've given us and our additional research. So maybe we could just shift over to this PowerPoint. And Ray just joined us as well. Welcome, Ray. We're just starting, so you haven't missed much. So some of this, and again, this is just to get your reaction, but we started giving some thoughts to the Gladstone community and what are qualities that make, I'm trying to minimize something here, excuse me. Shit. Oh, sorry. Okay, I lost my full screen here.
Don't you just love it?
I know.
Welcome to Zoom.
We can see it.
I know it. Says exit full screen. I don't want to exit full screen, do I? Okay, here. Ah!
Sometimes if
Okay.
you go to the bottom of your screen, it will.
Okay, I've seen you now. And okay, this is good. Good enough. Yay, thanks. Okay, I'm back. Anyway, we put together a few thoughts on words and what we think perhaps and from conversations with you, aspects and qualities you might be looking for. In terms of this, you have an amazing context, you know, when you really look at the geography, the confluence of the Clackamas River coming together with the Willamette. Obviously, it was probably a treasured spot even for the Native American Indians, indigenous people to settle here because it is such a special spot. You know, there's this, and this was a comment brought up in your questions too, is like, how do you capture the small town feel? It's obviously a civic building, so is there a civic character that feels right? You know, there's a strong heritage and history to Gladstone, so how can that be expressed in this building? Art, also maybe history can be an aspect of art too. And it's been brought up and talked about sustainable design. And then, you know, also looking to the future, that this is a moment in time, and how does this building feel great 50 years from now? And also have flexibility in terms of changes that are going to happen internally, but also just since this focus is primarily on the exterior character, how does it feel good and is enduring for a long time? This map was kind of fun to think about, just in terms of the red dot being the location for the library. And it's right, really the kind of center of Portland Avenue, which is that axis that runs through town. And there's kind of a zone of kind of more civic and retail development associated with Portland. But also there's the three neighborhoods. Primarily Gladstone is a residential community, and as I understand it anyway, there's a neighborhood to the west, to the east, and to the north. And really to the south is that connection to the river and the natural landscape there. Are there things missing here? Other thoughts about kind of attributes that we should be considering beyond just what we kind of outlined here? Is it a good start? We can come back to it too. Maybe we'll just move on. So when when you think about, the location of Gladstone, and I mean, I love this more historic image on the left, where you really do feel the landscape and the calmness of the river, and the presence of water certainly is another theme to think about when one starts to get into the more detailed design. Both how we capture rainwater, stormwater, or perhaps a water feature. People have brought up the geography of Gladstone, the fact that there's lots of even rocks in your yard that become features and amenities. And certainly this point here at High Rocks, I grew up in Portland and remember going swimming out here a few times myself, but the rock formations and how stone perhaps is another material to think about to kind of ground the library in this sense of place. Chime in. This is also just feel free to offer comments, especially on this slide. I remember one of our early discussions was brought up that, the symbol of Gladstone is the powwow tree. And so maybe that's something that could be expressed on the building, even in terms of artwork or sculpture. But beyond that, I think it's so fascinating. This is like living history right here. It's 230 years old. it goes back, you know, to the indigenous people here, and a location for a meeting place for the Native Americans. And since then, it's continued on as a living legacy, and it was the site of the first Oregon State Fair. It just has a structure. It's really powerful. It kind of conveys a sense of community. I mean, this big leaf maple is a multi-stem tree, and just how it rises up, and there's this kind of the kind of lightness of the limbs, and how it changes from pure structure in the winter to this canopy. There's a lot there to chew on, and inspiration. I don't know if others just want to share other thoughts about the powwow tree and what it means.
Well, I know at one point I had suggested that you maybe use a metal sculpture of it on the doors.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's something that could be done, but you see that kind of a thing on the glass doors.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
part of the trunk worked into the handles that you would pull to open
right.
the doors. Just something that crossed my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as a symbol, you know, if there's ways to integrate it, especially this is at the 100% corner and intersection, the civic really presence of Gladstone. So it seems really appropriate somehow to make reference to this important symbol of the city. And really, you know, nature is, I think, one of the kind of primary aspects of what really distinguishes your community, at least, you know, my, you know, just general observations, but that's exciting.
I also like the idea of using, like we saw up at Vancouver, some of the big rocks in places around.
Yeah.
They could, some of them could be put like between the sidewalk and the building.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's happy, or high rocks or happy rocks. So.
Yeah. Or even find their way into the courtyard, you know, I mean, be both, you know, yeah.
Well, like in Vancouver, they had some set so that you could, people could actually sit on them.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really nice idea. And there again, like Margaret said, it brings in the rocks to the.
Does anybody remember the first Gladstone library next door here that had 3? That's been done.
Todd, you kind of broke up. Could you, I'm not sure if everyone, maybe it was just me. Could you repeat that? Or did everyone hear it okay?
Oh,
okay.
I didn't hear him.
You're kind of frozen right now.
Frozen, yeah.
Yeah, he was referencing at least the original library, but I missed the last part. But we can also come back.
Okay.
Here you go. You're back now.
The original library, built in '62, had 3 big rocks sitting out front in the courtyard.
Cool. Well, I think that's powerful, you know. I mean, that's one of those distinguishing aspects of your community, especially if those rocks came from Gladstone too, would be, you know, certainly really powerful. So, you know, this digging a little more recent, but older history too, is the CHAUTAUQUA Festival. And, you know, that's something that, as I researched it, it was a national festival. It would occur at sites throughout the United States and during the summer. And Gladstone was really distinguished as having one of the largest CHAUTAUQUA festivals in the country. I think it was the 3rd largest at one point. And I think it might have been around that time that the city invested in building like an enclosed auditorium. I think it may have rained really hard the year before this was built. And so the community said, dang, we need to, you know, make an enclosed big room, kind of a big community room. There were up to 3,000 people that could fit in this space. It's really iconic in its own right. In fact, it was referred to as the beehive. So I love that term, you know, that kind of connection back to nature, and the fact that the structure was so embraced by the community that they came up or coined a name for it, an affectionate name. You know, I mean, maybe it's aspirational, but I would hope for, you know, this library that it may not be the beehive, but there may be a name that, you know, that just is a short term, an affectionate term for the building. You know, it should be a beloved building in the community, as obviously this was. The other thing that was interesting for me and Ray and all of us looking at this was this kind of enveloping roof. You know, it was a large scale building, but there's this kind of lower datum line that where all the windows are in the opening. And because of that, it actually creates a very strong connection to the landscape. And so the landscape and the interior space are really kind of blend together. It's sort of just an observation. You know, obviously the natural materials too, with the shingles. What other thoughts you might have on this? I mean, these are just thoughts I have, and a little bit of history. I'm not sure if I got the history right. I hope I did. But
They're all landmarks and historic and elements of Gladstone.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, this one really evokes that sense of a community room, this kind of grand space. And I think Beverly's brought it up, is like, how can, even though this isn't, you know, it's 6,000 square feet, how can it feel bigger, and kind of create that sense of a community space and room? Obviously, this is at a different scale, but there's an aspect to it that could recall this. Okay, we can move on. So it's interesting, you know, as the Chautauqua Festival was around for a long, long time, and it actually kind of died out a bit, and the festival kind of ended in 1927, and the land was actually sold to the Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists, and they developed this camp. The festival did come back, and you know, it kind of had a resurgence, and then kind of died back out in 2013, and now it's kind of transformed into the Gladstone Cultural Festival. So I guess an interesting aspect of it is in Gladstone that this kind of connection to festival, this indoor-outdoor living aspect is pretty unique and special. And the Adventists still have this site where it's a smaller site now, but it's a site where the Chautauqua Festival originally happened. Now it's turned into still some seasonal camping, but it's also a built conference center that's used year round, and it kind of sits kind of on that eastern edge of Gladstone, more in the residential context, and it has a lot of landscape with it. You can see the stone material is built into it, and the use of wood as a natural material, so it kind of evokes this kind of sense of lodge and connection to nature. Others, thoughts?
It's a church.
It's a church.
Period.
Nancy?
Nancy, I'm glad you brought this picture up, because I was going around town finding these buildings that I think really evoke the character of this part of Gladstone, especially where the library is going to go. And they're very lodge-like. There's always rocks on them, and I think that's something to consider when you're thinking about finishes.
Yes.
That type of structure.
Yeah.
I appreciate you locating these.
Yeah.
I do like the use of the rock and the wood to in conjunction with a lot of glass, because I think that softens it up a little bit more than a lot of the metal that was
Yeah.
in the design. I know it's probably not as cost effective, but you know, maybe in, you know, little bits here, little bits there to soften it up,
Yeah.
we might be able to, you know, do something like this, especially maybe around the entryway or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify it, I can see why, looking at the renderings, the assumption would be that's metal. To be quite honest, because it's so early in the design, we weren't trying to express material. We were trying to express something neutral. But when you express something neutral, it reads like something else. So it's a hard thing to do. But just so, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because, you know, if it was, I don't think we would want it to be metal, but we're really here to listen to you. But I can certainly see why, when you look at it, oh, that looks like a metal building, you know. So that certainly wasn't our intent. But what's actually good about it is you're reading things into it, and some of the things you're reading into it help us understand what we shouldn't do or what isn't appropriate. So there's value in it from a number of perspectives. Nancy, you have.
So I was wondering if there's anything about this stonework and the lodge look and that we are prevented from having because of cost. Is there extra cost associated with this, or have you not worked that out yet?
Yeah, I mean, we're not into understanding the exact character yet. I will say that, you know, we are looking closely at, we use that term, the floor area ratio to envelope. I mean, the more volume you build, the more costly it is for heating. We want to create that balance. Also, the taller the glass is, the more expensive it is. So it's finding that balance. You know, we're not sure what it is yet, but yeah, we're open to a variety of approaches here. I mean, one thing I will say too, as we go through this, we'll learn a little more. This particular building and where it's located is also kind of on the edge of the kind of central core of Portland Avenue. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We might want to go to the next image, actually, because it's kind of a companion to this one.
It looks like we have a hand up from Natalie. Just want to make sure she's able to get her question.
Yeah, I wanted to share something
Please.
regarding what you had, you know, the Adventist Conference Center. They came before the Planning Commission when they wanted to add onto that building. And they used some very interesting materials that I was very impressed with. They were also very cost effective and green. There's some of the panels that look like they're concrete, and they're actually not. So if we really like the look of that, I would highly recommend you actually go and look at some of the building materials they used, because it was very cost effective for them, and they were green.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. I mean, I couldn't believe it when they brought them to the Planning Commission and said, this is what we're going to use for the additional portion of it. And I'm like, wow, it really impressed me. So I thought it would, it might be a good thing to check out.
Well, and I'm all for going green too, if we can, as much as we can.
Well, we're always looking for affordable materials that are enduring and aesthetically pleasing. So we'll take a look at that.
And also, you know, recyclable in the sense that, you know, down the road if you want to change something. But I was very impressed with their architect that had made the selection. So I don't remember the name, but they had to get our design approval and they came before us. So that's why I wanted to add that in there, because it is a very beautiful building.
Cool.
I'll just add on the cost question. When we're at this level of our cost estimating, we are assuming not a bottom number and not the highest number, but a number that affords us other different opportunities, because we don't know yet. So we just want to make sure that we're not ruling out something early on. So I just want to say that that's kind of the approach when we're at this very, very early stage, because we don't have those things defined.
Thank you.
Another building that was brought up too was the Machinist Credit Union off of Clackamas, I think Boulevard or Avenue. And it's an interesting building. It actually sits right next to the Clackamas River too. So it's kind of in some ways a companion to the Adventist Conference Center, where they're kind of pushed more to the edge of town. And
yeah, that's a big building, but it's not a pretty building and it's not a historic building.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I forget who brought this up, but I thought it was, because it was brought up, we thought it was important to share. I mean, there may be other examples that might be more relevant, but I did notice this one's right next to the Clackamas River. Kind of has that more residential, lodge or residential feel that has the shingles on it and lots of landscape around it. But it's pushed, both the Adventist Conference Center and this building are a little more on the edge of Gladstone. That was just, in terms of location.
Yeah.
Beverly, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. The Adventist building is pretty, but we don't want to end up a mini-me for our library, because it's an attractive building, but it doesn't fit at all what I'm thinking of as what our library should look like.
Yeah.
I'm all for green materials and all of that, but I think that we need to do something that fits the design of Gladstone, not a copy of something else.
Jim, how would you describe the building of the City Hall that's there now, or just the style of that building?
The City Hall? Oh, there's the existing City Hall and the new City Hall. Why don't you hold that thought, because we're going to...
I'm talking about the old City Hall, not the new.
The old one? Well, I think we're going to show some images of that. I kind of wanted, and that's coming up in a moment.
Arts and crafts, bungalows.
Let's hold that thought till we kind of have the images of it, because we are going to talk about that, or I'd like to get your thoughts too. But so another comment brought up, and it's very valid, is just the residential scale. These may not, I'm not sure if these are exactly, one of these images I think are from the Arlington Campground neighborhood. But bungalows, oh, go ahead, someone.
I think it was somebody is not muted, that's all.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought this was interesting too, that although our site isn't in a residential neighborhood, the majority of Gladstone is residential. And the fact that the bungalow was brought up as an example, I thought was interesting. There's a sense of craft to a bungalow and detail that you experience. And I think that could have a lot to do with, creating a human scale and a coziness to the library, both interior and exterior. There's also an interesting aspect of bungalows, unique to their designs. They have big porches. So there's this like transition space between inside and outside, versus a Portland Foursquare is a very flat facade. Bungalows always have depth to them, which I think is really interesting, and this kind of sense of a covered porch. Oftentimes there's fences, and these fences, by nature are oftentimes very friendly, but they do demarcate a line between public and a more semi-public front yard. So the idea of layering, I think, is something that might be a consideration as well for the library.
Well, build us a green and green masterpiece.
Yeah, green and green. That's a...
Oh, and the nice thing about the bungalow style, it lends itself really well to rocks being part of it, and wood. And I think that's a better direction to go. I think that fits more in the community, and I think it would be easier to make it be that little jewel with that kind of going that direction.
It's true. The materiality has so much to do with how a place feels in the scale of those materials, the tactile qualities. So that's really helpful.
So
I
we
thought-
call this the bungalow style or arts and crafts style?
Well, you know, what I heard Beverly say was more about materials, but I do think the sense of craft, that how things are put together, you know, is really important as well. There's a way things are put together where it feels kind of commercial, and then there's a way that the materials
agree.
come together where it feels like, you know, there's a sense of care and human quality and craft to it.
Warm and cozy looking.
Yeah, warm and cozy, you know, I mean, those are
I
important.
have a question about the light availability in something like a Craftsman or a bungalow style, because I think what we want is we want a lot of light so that we're not having huge electricity bills and heating bills and so on. And I don't see it with a bungalow or Craftsman.
Well,
I have a comment.
Yes.
I have a comment. Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of against the bungalow craftsman style simply because I think it's looking backwards rather than forwards. I like it for a house, but not for a building. And I also don't like them that they're symmetrical. I think buildings are more interesting when they're asymmetrical. Also, the windows are too small. I like the idea of using natural materials, but I don't like the idea of having a bungalow for a library.
I agree.
Okay, well, this is a good discussion. I'm glad that, I mean, I love the fact that some of these building types were brought up as, you know, it really helps for us to
not working.
do this.
It's not working. You have to get off the internet.
Shall we go on to the next image?
I've just got a comment here, Jim. All these reference images are really important in the sense that they help us understand what you like. And out of each building, there are characteristics and materials and things that are real appealing to you. And I think part of our job is to find a way to bring those forward into and meld them with the other things about your library and about the future of your library that you've all talked about. So this is really good to hear this broader discussion and to understand what kinds of things they're really appealing to you. And it's great material for the next transformations that this design will go through. Next.
Yeah, so the other aspect, kind of, we were talking about buildings more on the perimeter of the downtown, especially Portland Avenue. Obviously this image a little more historic, but not too historic. But it is that summer event where you have the antique auto show, and it's kind of exciting where you take over the street, and the main street really becomes a pedestrian and event space. But it shows also, I love this view, just that straight shot down Portland Avenue, and this is looking to the south towards the river. Really, this is kind of taken, the library would be just to the bottom left at the intersection. So we can go to the next image. This next one is just a little more, just another day in Gladstone, kind of an overcast day, but a recent photo. And I thought it was interesting. I mean, this is right next to our site, and it's the kind of retail zone. And you can see there is a lot of glass at the kind of lower street level. But as you kind of go above that datum line of the glass, the buildings become more kind of opaque, whether it's the building on the corner that has the kind of mansard type of roof shape, or further down you can see how the building facade is more opaque, and it's almost a kind of an old Western town feel too, that there are some kind of false facades that come up higher to kind of give a sense of stature to these buildings. The roof might actually be lower. So it's just interesting to look at that character. And then, you know, you're probably all aware of this or been on the committee for this, but pretty recently there's been a study for downtown revitalization plan, and really the focus looking at Portland Avenue and just kind of envisioning what the future might be, including, you know, future potential building sites. I think they're shown in red blocks that you can see. And it's interesting too, the most prominent intersection that where the library is going is indicated in a blue circle. And there's a little footnote to the side that talks about a streetscape development, or kind of really maybe marking that intersection with a special paving. This is probably far reaching, but even that kind of visionary, like, wow, would Portland Avenue actually even extend across the Clackamas River with a bridge and make, you know, other linkages? But the idea is that, you know, we're at an interesting point right now where Portland Avenue, you know, 10, 15 years from now, maybe have a slightly different character and evolve. In fact, there was an artist rendering, that's the next slide, whether, you know, this comes about or not, but the same study, they took a look at, you know, how do you retain some of the lower scale buildings and perhaps even build in retail at the lower level and have perhaps some housing that might be above, might be 2 or even 3-story buildings. So, and taking over parts of the street with, you know, opportunities for the sidewalk to expand out or become kind of sidewalk cafes. So anyway, it's important to kind of frame our thinking that what we look at right now as an existing condition will evolve over time, and this is one vision for it. And thinking in mind, well, how will the library be a catalyst or fit into even this type of context?
I like that we have a stoplight in that rendering.
Yeah.
There's traffic.
Yay. It's, yeah, as well as the paving for traffic calming. So yeah, so I thought that was just really interesting. There's a lot of energy and thinking about the future, you know, what that might be. And so obviously that's what we're doing right now, right? We're thinking about the future and what feels right. I thought, you know, the next kind of series of images really kind of speak to the zone of Portland Avenue from the intersection, kind of working our way north even to the new Civic Center site. So back to Todd's comment, the next image is, you know, you know, your existing city hall. And I thought this was kind of cool, just the construction photo of it. It's a building that is, it's pretty noble. You know, it's a very kind of taunt building, kind of almost, gosh, you know, it's very kind of modern in a way, actually, kind of a stripped down, I don't know what you call it, Ray. It's almost kind of a, I want to say Georgian architecture where there's very little, you know, bands or detail. There is an expression of a cornice up high. It was an interesting building because when this was built, the main entry that you see facing Dartmouth was the kind of the door into the fire station. There is the library was in this. I mean, it was the one stop, everything was in this building. And when we first arrived at the site, the building struck me as like, there was no doubt that's the Civic building. That is marking City Hall. And part of it has to do with the fact that it is 2 stories tall. You know, that struck me. The image on the right is today, obviously. facing, you know, back towards Portland. I was struck by the fact that, you know, there was this kind of trellis sunscreen element that was kind of added onto the building. And I actually kind of found it appealing that it was adding another layer to what was a very flat facade. And obviously the landscape that started to kind of grow up in front of the building, but probably kind of a makeshift thing that just happened, but there's sort of an implicit kind of character to that that's kind of fun. Also,
I'm sorry, it's just a boring old cement building that I don't think has any character to it whatsoever.
Yeah. It has that kind of gray color too. I think some people talked about, or gray blue, that it's sort of kind of dead feeling. And then the windows are quite small, you know, which doesn't make it very inviting.
Yeah,
So.
I don't want a new library to look like that.
Okay.
Just putting that out there.
That's good. That's good feedback.
I'm with her. It's an ugly building. It's an eyesore.
Okay.
We don't want anything like that.
It's plain, ugly, and has nothing to recommend it.
Well, thank God we're tearing it down.
But maybe we could get some protesters to burn it down.
Amen. A burned down cement, that would be good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very stout, that's for sure.
I'm looking for the day that we all get a chance to take a sledgehammer and take a swing at it.
All right. That sounds great. But that's good feedback. All right, well, across the street there's another building, and this building was built kind of also in the 40s, but a little later. And, you know, I imagine when this was first built, you know, it was considered actually a fairly contemporary modern building, the kind of streamlined curved lines to it. Since it's been built almost 80 years later, it's now kind of a historic building, right? And yet it's well loved. It's become kind of a signature in many ways to, you know, some of the heritage and character of Gladstone. I mean, others, please chime in, but I find it kind of be a cool building in many ways. And this
it's a very cool building.
It is, and it has solid walls, but there's more transparency and a scale to it. It's yeah. This is so this is kind of moving right next to our context. So we got the post office, which has lots of glass, but it's gray walls. It's not unlike the city hall in that it's just, there's no character to those walls. Even though it has lots of glass, I don't know what others think, but it doesn't feel very friendly.
Well, really, most of Main Street doesn't have a lot of character. And that's why we need the library to have some character.
Okay.
Yeah, now when the fire department redid the front of their building, I mean, that was a big upgrade to that for sure.
Yeah.
But like Beverly said, you know, when we showed the shot of the street, I mean, there's no character.
Yeah.
It's just kind of boring. So it'd be nice to just add a little bit of design and light and airiness and something to kind of give it some pizzazz. It's in desperate need of pizzazz.
It is. You know.
Well, what we're seeing is tons and tons and years of deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
That's turning around now. Things will start to look better.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do anything with a mid-century modern post office.
Yeah, well, you probably could. You know, a lot of it could be the walls, and there's
help.
Lots of upgrades. What's that?
Color would help.
Well, I was going to say color is big. I mean, even
or even a mural on the
mural.
blank.
That would be beautiful to add a mural on that wall.
Cinder block construction
looks good. It has some design to it. It has color, but you could do a lot with the post office with some trim, some color, a mural, something.
Okay. This is all really helpful. maybe we'll move on to the next image. So further down the street, there's the high school, and I think over time they've added these canopies to make it a little more friendly and inviting. And obviously, when they built the gym, they, instead of just having one material, they thought about how to bring the scale of it down by having a base and a top. But not a lot of windows or openness. It's not a particularly friendly building. Other thoughts on that? Okay, this one is pretty interesting now. This was old Thriftway. We had we had our workshop to start to envision, and you were working with puzzle pieces, putting together ideas. This is where we did that meeting. And there was a lot of, I think, positive feedback on this. Even the outside of the building has a lot of glass. There's a sunscreen element, actually, that kind of undulating curved piece that has some graphics and branding on it. And but it does filter some of that east sunlight. But it has kind of an overall kind of a friendly quality about it. And when you get inside, what's really nice is all the wood structure, and most of that's exposed. They put acoustical treatment up that covers a lot of the wood. There's ways to do acoustics that doesn't necessarily require a white material. You could use wood that might have made it feel even warmer. And then there's glassy kind of conference rooms. And I think one person, I forget who it was, but they said, there's aspects to this that, we might think about building into the library. So, thoughts?
I like that there's a lot of texture out there, and I think that is something that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you know exactly what the function of this building is by kind of the outside of it, and it's very friendly and it's welcoming, which obviously is the point of it. So, I'm not sure about all the color, but tempered a little bit, I think, would be better. But again, they're playing to their audience where you would want a lot of color. But I do like I do like the texture, with kind of like the curved brick there that you could sit on, or so I think that is something perhaps that we can look at.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting within the library. Like I hear your point of almost like, is there too much color? But there might be places that, for instance, there is a children's area in the library, and within that children's area, could there be some materials and character that helps kind of reinforce that? With
well, absolutely, because they're little sponges at that age, and you want to soak up and feed to their senses.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and color is probably one of the least expensive ways to make changes in a design.
Yep. Absolutely.
And definitely in the children's area, I think there should be, nice color, good color, and color that appeals to children.
Is there value in making the library look like this, or the children's area of the library?
Yeah. I mean, there could be color even on the outside of the building,
I've all froze up. I can't see or hear.
I mean, certainly the fire station has color on it. There's, it doesn't, and it's just that, it'd just be interesting to study also how that color is applied, where it feels enduring and timeless, and but can you have bring the inside out as well? There's qualities about transparency that can allow the interior to actually activate the exterior as well. So lots of potential.
Really does that with the two-story glass wall. It really has a nice feeling of inside outside. Great that way.
This one does, yeah.
Yeah, what I like
Yeah.
about the Children's Center are the curves. I think it really softens a building,
Yeah.
makes it look friendly. I like
Yep.
the idea of color, but I think the outside of a library, our color might be from nature.
Yeah.
And then on the inside, use the natural colors, but maybe pep it up a little bit, especially in the Children's Center.
Yeah, I
Add
think
some pizzazz.
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Natural, enduring materials on the
Right.
outside.
But
Um,
add color
yeah.
on the inside where
Yeah.
we can change things when we get tired of it.
That's a good idea. Like that's, yeah. Cool. Well, then, there's your existing library. And there's aspects of this that we really think are interesting, the fact that it is this kind of a singular room, the structure in it, the fact that there's glue lamp beams and columns actually creates a rhythm and kind of a cadence and scale that breaks down the scale and provides some warmth to it as well. Just wanted to throw that out there. I think the
One
wood
thing
there
about
helps.
this, one
Yeah.
thing I like about this library is the little windows you see on the left.
Oh,
If they were bigger, they're up high above the
stacks.
the books, but they do, when the light's coming from that direction, they do let in a lot of light. There's not
Yes.
much else in the library, but those windows do let in a lot of light.
That's really neat. Yep. I like that. Then further up the street, this has just opened up your new Civic Center. It's, got City Hall in there and then also police. I imagine with the police that kind of drove some of the smaller windows. But it does have, a glassy open entry and the wood, I'm not sure if you've been inside of it yet, but there's a wood structure in the main kind of interior street, and that wood kind of comes out. So that part's nice. Here's some of the interior views that we were kind of struck by, which is the wood structure being expressed. On the right side's really kind of the idea of a gallery, the opportunity to display history and art. And on the left side, the use of wood that encapsulates some display windows and also provides some acoustical treatment, provides warmth. In this case, part of it's a concrete floor, but it feels like a civic building, especially on the inside. There's some aspects of this that are really kind of nice. And in some ways, the library is kind of the bookend. When you think of the civic street of Portland Avenue, this is at one end, the north end, and at the south end will be the library. Thoughts on this at all?
I like the wooden ceiling. I think that looks really nice and warm. And the wooden beams, that's very, very friendly and inviting.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Very nice. It's similar to what we saw in the Vancouver library that you took us to see.
Yeah.
And I really like that, the warmth of it.
Yep. Well,
hey, this is Jackie.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that wood is cross-laminate timber, and it is a sustainable element from Clackamas County. So we're very proud of that.
Oh, I didn't know that was CLT.
Nicely
done. Now I see it. That's great.
Yep.
Well, that's a good lead-in, Jackie, to the next slide. So these are a few examples of some other projects. Some of them are, some aren't. Most of them are ones that we've done. But we thought that CLT that's used at your Civic Center might be an opportunity to use as a structure for the library. This is a rendering of a project that's currently under construction right now that we're doing. It's a community center in Hillsborough, and the whole project's CLT. And so we're very familiar with that. We're on our third CLT project that's under construction right now, so we're very familiar with the material. This is a community room, and what's really interesting about the CLT as Jackie was saying, you can use local materials. That's also a county-wide initiative within Clackamas County to be able to use local forest products. The aesthetic of the wood is really a wonderful thing, and we're hearing you echo that. You can, in this case, we have a wood ceiling with acoustical treatment above, and part of that is that wood ceiling's concealing ductwork, so you don't see the mechanical ductwork. But you can also do CLT. We're doing on a project where the acoustics are integrated into the panels. So you don't necessarily have to add another layer of acoustics. But the bottom line is you can have a room that really feels like a wood room and has a lot of warmth to it. The other thing you can do, and it's the image on the right, it's a library that we did at University of Oregon. It's a subterranean library where most of the libraries actually is with a sunken courtyard. And you can do the glass wall actually in a wood structure versus many tall glass walls. They're all aluminum and they're metal. And in this case, you're feeling the warmth of the wood as a structural element. So that's something that we've started to integrate into projects as well. So that's another way to provide warmth. This, as I mentioned, in this library, it has a courtyard that you can access the next. Oh, and just one other quick point about CLT. It's very efficient in terms of the construction of it. It goes up very quickly. And with that, there's an economy of it. If you can keep the structure pretty simple, very straightforward, a lot of repetition, then it goes up very fast and is very cost effective. And it also has a very light carbon footprint. So from a sustainability perspective, it's a much more sustainable material than building it out of steel or concrete. So there are a lot of virtues to cross-laminated timber. But we can potentially move on if you like. And then this is the image on the left is the courtyard at the University of Oregon, and it has lovely landscape. It's all kind of indigenous woodland type landscape, because it's mostly a shade garden, not unlike probably what you might find in a courtyard that in any of the schemes we're looking at. It also has access out to the courtyard, so there's benches and places to sit. This is the type of courtyard that the maintenance to it's very limited. Just, 3 or 4 times a year you go out with a garden bag and snip and prune, and it's not a high maintenance landscape. You can also think about the walls that open up to the courtyard, literally opening up. So just because they're glass walls doesn't mean you can't open them up and just feel like you're right next to the landscape, not necessarily walk on that landscape, but feel like the garden is coming literally into the library. And especially in seasonal shoulder seasons, having that fresh air, a day like today, you would want to open up those doors potentially and have really a wonderful experience, right?
Is this like accordion doors you're talking about for the glass doors, or?
There's lots of ways to do it. This is actually a sliding door, so it just slides open.
Okay.
So there's different ways to do it.
Okay.
You can do accordion doors too. The nice thing, the sliding doors you could open up just part way, and the stacking. And with accordion doors, then you have a stacking area.
That's what I was concerned about. So, okay, yeah, sliding would be
better.
What's so
neat about this is with the sliding doors, it doesn't take away any usable space. So, yeah. So those are all considerations.
That would be very important for our library because we don't want to lose space for something like that.
Exactly.
I have a concern about the glass door for the middle garden, because I remember in the option 3 it connect to the children's area. I'm just as a parent, so concerned the kids, when they excited come to the courtyard, run around, and those glass maybe will become a potential issues, has an area for them. Extend bump on the glass and
well, that's a great concern. And honestly, the location of doors or whether glass comes down to the ground, all of that is up for design. It's not designed yet at all. In fact, there's a case to be made. Would it make more sense to have a door access to the courtyard, if that's desired, going into the courtyard, to not have it in a children's area, and make sure that it's a door that everyone can use? And those are all conversations to have. We're just not there yet. And, like Jennifer explained last time, we have months and months of design coming up. But those are all, that's just a great question. And, but we aren't closing the door literally on any of these options.
So Jim, I've got a question, and Mitzi, I also want you to weigh in on this too, because I assume that if we decide to do like the sliding doors or whatever, there would be a locking option that the library itself would monitor, but also Mitzi, would the staff need to kind of be monitoring that as well? Because, parents, God love them, don't always watch their children as well as they should, and kids get rambunctious and excited about things. So is this a concern that as a librarian and staff that you guys would have, is having that kind of access off the children's room?
Well, again, as Jim was talking about, we certainly could put the entry into the courtyard somewhere else. And this is part of why I like option 3, in that it's very centrally located and it's very visible from the staff service point.
Agreed, yeah.
It would be difficult for us to kind of staff that area, but if it's visible, it should be pretty easy for us to monitor. And I would probably advocate to have the opening more towards the collection and not the kids area, but that's up for discussion.
Right. Well, you're going to be using it, so your opinion is absolutely highly valued, because you're going to be working with it all the time.
Thank you.
I want to just say that there are lots of opportunities to solve problems when we work through design, and I think at this stage what's really important is the feeling that we're wanting to hear from you all. So the idea of a courtyard and living space versus enclosed space, and access to it, whether it's visual or physically able, there's lots and lots of ways for us to deal with the kind of safety and technical issues of the building. So I just want to make sure people don't feel like we're limited yet, because there's just a lot of different solutions. We really want to understand the feeling in these buildings, and that's why this conversation is so important.
Yeah. You can go maybe to the next image. So it was brought up, obviously sustainable design. Many people have mentioned that from the task force, and even the mention of net zero. I shared that we recently completed a year ago or so the education center at the Oregon Zoo. It's also a net zero building. You can see the aerial drone view of all the photovoltaics to achieve that net zero. It's an interesting building too. The image on the right indicates, even stormwater becomes an opportunity for interactive display. There's a sculpture that's done by an artist. The outside of the building is really an extension of the indoor space. So in this case too, a lot of wood. And so I might just define a little bit. Net zero is a term for an energy sustainable design where essentially you don't need to bring in additional energy sources to heat the building or cool it. It's handled through the design of the building being an optimal envelope. That gets into like how much volume you're creating, how much glass. Glass can be great in terms of bringing in good daylight, but you can also lose energy through glass, the type of insulation. All that matters, the envelope. Also, the other key thing is having a very energy efficient mechanical system. And so if you start to get all these components coming together, then the last piece of it is really, you know, can you create enough photovoltaic energy that balances that energy efficient design so you can get to net zero. So at the end of the year, you have no heating bill. You're generating all your energy on site. And so we did do a quick analysis. We were curious. And we know that the building's 6,000 square feet. It's 1 story with some various roof heights. But our mechanical engineer thought we could potentially, with the mechanical system we have now and what he knows, if we had 3,600 square feet of solar array, we could be potentially a net zero building, which is actually pretty darn exciting. I think, you know, we have more than that much roof area, and, you know, we could easily, I think, integrate that type of photovoltaic array. And we also know too that through the Energy Trust of Oregon and other resources and grants, there's ways to even help pay for some of the cost of that array. No matter what, we would design the building to be a net zero building, to be ready to be net zero. And you can add photovoltaics, either build them all in initially if the funding's there for it, or be able to add it incrementally. You know, it's, you know, his initial thought is, you know, for that full array to be net zero, it's probably a $120,000 investment. And yet probably a significant portion of that, you know, maybe up to even 70% of that could be funded through grants and other resources. So lots of potential here. So that's not a pie in the sky idea that your library could be net zero. It's something that's probably quite feasible.
I find that very exciting and would love to go forward. Personally, would love to, you know, explore as much as we could in being green and net zero, and probably, you know, the city and the county and whoever pays the bills would probably enjoy that as well.
Exactly.
Well, we can put it on the roof when we're all done.
Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
We can put it on the roof when we're all finished, whatever the design is.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying, that it can fit up on the roof. I think we could, you know, if it took 10,000 square feet of solar to create a net zero building, it'd be a different problem. But I think with 3,600 square feet, it's very reasonable and cost effective.
Jim, I just want to compliment you on timing your conversation about solar, which with a ray of sunlight coming behind your head.
Oh, yeah.
Very serendipitous. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then just a couple more images and we can just open it up. I know we're only got about 17 minutes left regarding timing, but there are, you know, there's so many different approaches to a layering of solar screening. There's kind of a new project that was built, the Conservancy Center, the Natural Conservancy Building, and it was very interesting. There is a kind of a solar screen. There's a use of the wood, landscape, and stones are all kind of part of that entry experience. And there's a layering to it and a warmth. At least this particular photograph, I think, conveys that is kind of interesting. You know, the dappled light that could come through that screen. On the right, a different approach to a screen, different project. This is the University of Oregon. We actually, there's a sunscreen on that. And this is an interior view. And it starts to show how that, in this case, the sunscreen has a lot of variety to it. It has almost kind of a whimsical kind of dappled light pattern. And there are separate panels. And in this case, the separate panels are all embedded. It's a science building at the U of O, so each panel is embedded with a different pattern that's specific to the chromosome of DNA. And so together, this creates a pattern that expresses the DNA pattern that's within the zebrafish. So it's artistic, it's interesting. In this case, it has content that actually relates to their science program. Obviously, our hope would be if we did some sort of sunscreening that it would feel very much a part of and comfortable and tells a story about Gladstone.
It'd be interesting to do something like that with the CHAUTAUQUA tree or something like that. Could be very interesting.
Could be really beautiful, almost. Yeah, like you're under the umbrella of the CHAUTAUQUA.
Exactly, like the canopy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's something we thought about, that if you had wood structure that comes up, they're like the big limbs or the trunk, you know, coming up of the tree, but then the canopy is really the rest of it. That's a exciting metaphor, perhaps, for the project, you know. Yeah. Well, then art, you know. Lots of potential for art, but this was the image on the left. It's just a close-up, but it's an example, reminded me of the CHAUTAUQUA tree idea. In this case, it's about a cactus because it's in Phoenix, but the artist who we're actually working with on a project in Hillsborough, her name's Nori Sato, she embedded a stencil pattern on glass. There's a metal sculpture in the foreground that is the kind of smaller elliptical shape. And then there's this layered metal, Corten metal that's on the facade. But together, the layer is all about creating this more natural expression of a desert landscape and a cacti in this condition. But I thought it was quite beautiful in terms of what you could do with layers and create a literal expression, in this case, of a cacti. And then, of course, you know, the garden itself, a sculpture garden or the courtyard could be a sculpture garden, and sculpture could find its way in the front of the building. If I included more images, they would be of walls inside the library where you can hang art, or even have a portion of it that might be specific to the heritage and the history of Gladstone. So I think there's just so much potential that we all are excited about with art as well, and how that could be integrated. Those are the images we pulled together. We're probably missing many, many more, but we wanted to just kind of share a flavor, both of, you know, thinking about how we can embrace the sense of place of Gladstone and what makes it unique, and, you know, how we can also think about the future and sustainability and everything in between. So we have about 15 minutes left, so we're just kind of open to hearing your thoughts.
Well, the image on the right of the garden.
I want to add really quickly that.
Simple.
Hi, can I interject really quickly? This is Amber. I just want to add that we do need to leave a little bit of room for public comment. Looks like we just have one person, so I don't anticipate it taking up too much time, but I just want us to be mindful of that. So just a few more minutes until we can start that segment.
Thanks, Amber. Todd, do you want to share your thought?
The one on the left looks like a, marginally expensive installation. Is it part of the building?
It is. Yeah, it's actually a library in Phoenix.
Okay.
And it was part of
just
percent for
I'd
art.
just like to have, like, if the art is going to be part of the building, it'd like to be functional.
Sure. Yep. That's a good comment. Sure.
So like the diffusing, light that we saw in the previous would be functional as well as art. Is that where you're getting to, Todd?
Yes.
Okay.
And
I agree.
Things like that, garden, like art installations like the one on the right.
Right.
It'll look good for a few weeks. It'll pass away. It'll get forgotten. It'll be in the city's back lot.
And it'll grow moss.
But if we invest in the structure,
yeah, what's kind of
we'll have
interesting,
something that's there forever.
I love that. The other thing is, let's say if there's this screen that's on the glass, but if functionally that was an area of the library that you wanted to feel more privacy, then that takes on even more meaning, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I hear you. No, that's good. That's helpful.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if that's okay, just so we have time for comment and conversation.
Yep.
Other thoughts?
I like the idea of
window treatment they did in the library with the wood framing on the windows.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good concept. They could be a little bit smaller, but be with the wood framing.
Yeah.
Is there a requirement that we spend a certain amount of our budget toward art?
No, not that I know of, unless, is Jackie still here? Maybe there isn't anything I've come across.
Okay.
Yes, I'm still here, and I do not believe that there is a requirement. We did not do that at the Civic Center.
Okay.
Interesting. What about county projects? I like the bridge. And isn't there one of those art installation bracelets hanging off a bridge in Gladstone because they were required to spend money on art?
I think it depends on where your money comes from for the project. Sometimes there is a % for art that's required, but it is specific to certain types of funding. So that might be part of it.
We all favor art anyway, though. Right?
But I think it would be nice if, like in a lot of the places where the art is donated by different groups or people, and then it can be changed out.
Yeah.
Rotating.
Yeah, it
rotating.
Keeps it fresh and alive too, that it's not static. I think Todd was saying there's a point where you just don't look at it anymore.
Well, we don't have to spend a lot of money on art. We can rotate it in.
Yeah.
Well, I assume there'll be a separate committee that works on art at some point in time.
Oh, there'd have to be.
Yeah.
Well, I think art is very important, but I like the idea of rotating and changing because otherwise it just becomes wallpaper. But I do think at some point we might want some sculpture or something permanent, but maybe down the road a ways, and that might be something for fundraising later on.
Well, like we talked about, was it last meeting, like maybe buying bricks with people's names on it or something like that could go toward funding an art project or funding the solar or funding something else. I think that's a way that we can, something extra. Yeah.
Something extra that's not in the budget, but some of the art, some of the maybe extra benches, whatever isn't included in our budget.
Right.
Well, I think that's
and
what the foundation is kind of planned for all along, trying to do those things.
Yes, the foundation has that separate account with money, and that they can make recommendations on how they want to spend that. And that's an excellent idea for that.
Okay, so what is this fund you're talking about?
It's money that the foundation has raised. And some of it has been money that has been donated by people to be used for the library, either for collections or for things in the library.
Actually, I think what Jackie was talking about was the money that the library board had that they were going to give to the foundation but couldn't, so the city's holding on to it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But we have money in the foundation in addition to that.
And at last week's meeting, someone, and I don't remember who, said that the foundation could work with someone from the county to do fundraisers like bricks and things. And I would love for whoever from the county does that to get a hold of us so we could start putting something together.
So
call me.
So the foundation money, I just don't understand how this works. Do you foundation for the Clackamas County Library?
No, for Gladstone.
For the Gladstone City Library?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's money we've been
council.
So you guys raise money and it'll go to this library, even though it's part of the county library.
Yes. It will go to this library. It's money that the foundation has raised over the last number of years from book sales, from a lot of donations, a lot of fundraisers, and we've been saving it for the library, and we would like to use it toward whatever is needed.
It is actually in a city resolution, yes.
Yeah, well, there's a city money and there's the foundation money. And we want to spend it on this library. That's our goal.
Sounds like a discussion for another committee.
Why?
Absolutely. But it's foundation money, and so we will make the determination, but we will work with the architects and the county to make sure it's used correctly. Yeah.
All right, so on that note, I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time for public comment. It looks like we do have one person in the audience here, Bonnie SB. Bonnie, please go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to give any comment. I'll go ahead and just give you a moment to do that if you would like to. Okay, I see it. I'll allow you to talk. Hi, Bonnie, we can hear you. Oh. If you could unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
I really like all the ideas. I'm really excited about, I agree with everybody. I want to look forward with the building. I like the light. I like the sustainability. It's very exciting. I think you guys are on the right track.
Thanks for coming to the meetings. We appreciate your input and interest.
Oh, absolutely. It's very exciting.
And we need input from the staff, because there are things I'm sure we're overlooking that are very important to staff members. We need to hear from them.
Absolutely. Yes, agreed.
There's one thing that was mentioned to me earlier that's in the library now, those 3 lights that are just above the teen area that were donated to the library years ago, and how those somehow could be incorporated into the new library.
Are they blue?
There's 3 different colors.
Okay. All right. I think I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, they're hanging lights that are different, have different colored shades on them.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that we do keep those. They're very beautiful.
I'll have to look at those someday when the library is open and I can go in and look at them again. I don't think I've ever
One of these days.
Someday in the future.
It's good to hear from you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys. You guys all are great.
We miss you. We miss you, Bonnie.
I miss being a part of the library, but we're going to start opening. We're giving limited curbside service. We're starting this week. Monday, people can return their items on the 15th, and then we're giving limited curbside service starting on Tuesday. So
excellent.
It's exciting.
It's a start.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think back over to you, Catherine.
All right. I don't know if Lorraine's still here.
I am. It's an interesting meeting when you can't see anything. So I look forward to seeing all of the pictures, but I loved hearing all of your comments. Very exciting.
I think it was fruitful. I think we kind of, at least for me, I got a little bit better idea of some options of things we can do and might want to do. So thank you, Jim and Ray and Catherine and Jennifer and Amber, all you guys. Oh, Mona, I forgot about Mona. Yeah, so thank you guys for putting this together. I think it was a great presentation.
Good.
Well, thank you for all your input. It's really helpful and really valuable.
Yeah, thanks for, you know, it was the last minute, and I really appreciate the design team jumping in and putting it together, and then you guys meeting an extra week, and you're indefatigable. So we really appreciate that. So we will see you next week too. So it's a weekly thing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So don't forget to do your surveys if you haven't done them already.
Yes, Mom.
We'll do those.
Okay, thank you so much, and I think we're adjourned.
Okay, see you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Okay.